Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the TheEdCollab Gathering. It is our spring 2018 gathering, and we are so honored and happy and excited to have you here with all of us today. As you know, the TheEdCollab Gathering is a free, no registration K-12 literacy conference that is put on by incredible people and volunteers from all over literally the world. By last check, we had, I believe it was 40 countries that have tuned in so far. Just a few shout outs to, pulling up my list here. Hello to the Dominican Republic, United Arab Emirates, Croatia, India, Oman, Jordan, China, New Zealand, Germany, Romania, Taiwan, and the list goes on and on and on. We're so happy to have all of you joining us here today on a day that's really here for to celebrate the joy and love of literacy learning. So to start out, I have just a few announcements to begin our day, a little information on how this day works if this is your first time joining us, a few exciting new things from the TheEdCollab, and then we'll get started with our keynote, the reason why I know you are all here today. So first, our keynote this morning, which will be joining us in a few minutes, is Ellin, Keene, and Dr. Nell Duke. They are authors. I'll introduce them again before we start, but they are co-editors, I should say, of the Not This But That series, along with all the other reasons that all of you have come here today. I'll give us a slightly truncated but more formal welcome to them when we switch over. Another important thing to note, and I realize I'm working with one of our tech volunteers, Carolyn, here. And Carolyn, I promised you that I'd be letting you know when to go to the next slide, but now I'll let you know. You can go to the next slide, to slide number 6. So one important thing to know is that I'll back up a little bit for you to the charity one. There we go, perfect. Because this day is totally free and no registration, one thing we ask you to do every gathering is to pay the joy forward. We would like you to share all of the excitement and love and learning and collaboration that you gain from today, and to think, what would you normally pay for a coffee at a conference? What would you normally pay for lunch? What might you even pay for a registration, or even to travel somewhere if you're feeling so generous? Think about the ways that you might normally be using funds to attend an event like this. And instead, we invite you to pay the joy forward. So every TheEdCollab gathering, we adopt a charity or few, and we ask our opening keynote to do just that. So today's charity that has been adopted by Ellin and Nell is No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength. No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength uses research and best practices to help to ensure that children throughout the United States do not live in hunger. The United States is actually really far down on the list of countries in the world in terms of childhood poverty rates. We have kind of vacillated between the highest and within the top 3 for childhood poverty, if you can believe that. And so one thing that No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength does is to raise funds and to support volunteer efforts and food donations and other ways of lowering childhood hunger. And their fight is to get to the point where there is literally no kid hungry in the US. And it's a goal worthy throughout the world. So if you are joining us today, you feel inspired at any point today, please go on to our main gathering website, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. You can just scoot on over to where it says our charity page. You can see the logo there. There you'll find a direct link to the charity. You don't spend any money through us, you just will pay them directly. If you do donate to today's charity, we'd love if you could tweet about it using today's hashtag. Then if you join us throughout the day, at the end of the day, our closing session is Roz Taught Me. So as you know, one of our colleagues and friends, Dr. Roz Linder, actually left us. She passed away in December. It was sudden and something that really rocked our community and all of the communities around her. And so we, over the past month, have had on our blog a series we called Roz Taught Me, where a number of colleagues here at the TheEdCollab and some special guests have shared some posts talking about the things that Roz has taught us. Our closing session today, which begins at 3 p.m. Eastern, will be led by myself, Maggie Beatty-Roberts, Joellen McCarthy, and Heather Rocco to just celebrate some of the learning that we've had with her. It's not really a memorial, it's really instead a celebration. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. A couple of quick announcements from the EdCollab directly. If you go onto our agenda page, the very top line of the agenda is the session that I streamed live last night and is now recorded. That just talks about some updates from us. Just the very fast version is if you go there, you also will find a link to our professional learning services guide for the coming school year that has lots of ways that you can work with us at your school through our online offerings or some free events and free services as well too. So we'd love to have you check that out. Also, I make a big announcement. So here's something very big and different for us and very huge. For the first time ever, we are opening up joining the EdCollab as a member of our small little family. We consider all of you members of our family, but to really become a member, like all the faces that you see on our website, for the first time ever, we're opening that up to application. It was a conversation that we had internally where we realized, you know, what we love about our family at the EdCollab is that we've invited faces and names that we know, as well as educators that many of us have worked directly with, both names that you know and people that you read, and up and coming leaders in literacy as well too. And our goal is to continue to develop the future of literacy voices. But what we really reflected on, and we thought about the kind of, you know, privilege that we were having around that, is if we're only thinking about people that we know, that we've interacted closely with, or even that we assume would want to join us, because we make a lot of assumptions that you probably wouldn't want to be a part of this thing, we realize that we're limiting ourselves, that we're not able to invite people that we haven't met yet, but like all of you that are doing incredible, important, amazing work in the world. So I'd like to introduce our associate member. We are accepting applications right now. If you go to that top link in our agenda, you can see, I'll talk more about it in that video. There also is a link to an information packet so you can learn more about that position. But it's basically 1 year of intensive study with us as a member of the EdCollab. You'll become a junior member of our group. And during that year, you will present at gatherings like this. You write blog posts with us. You'll also attend our internal think tank meetings. So if you or someone you know is an inspiring educator that you believe has lots to say and can really help shape the future of literacy, professional development, and learning in our country and around the world, please consider applying for this exciting opportunity. So we're really looking forward to it. We don't know what's going to happen. We also feel like maybe no one's going to want to do anything with this, and that's fine too. But we wanted to open that up to you. So again, you can find more information there. And Carolyn, you can skip over the next one and go to, I think it's number 11. So you can skip that one. So back one. Just back up one. Perfect. So some how to do today. So if you haven't joined the EdCollab gathering before, it works like this. If you are on our website, you can find all of the sessions that you'd like to view right there. Just stay on the session page, and when they go live, you will see them. You also can follow us at our Twitter handle at TheEdCollab, and that's where we'll be sharing live links as well as YouTube links in case anything happens on the web page. To interact with our presenters today, or to just see who else is there, we can't all actually be in the room together, although there are a number of large groups today. West Orange, hey West Orange, EdCamp New Jersey, hey EdCamp New Jersey, and there's several others that are actually streaming this live together as a group. So if you're there as a group, you're there as a group. But if you aren't, what you'll do is you'll use the hashtag, TheEdCollabGathering on Twitter, and then you'll also include the workshop number. So if you look at, for example, workshop number 1, Carla and Luz, you see it's number 1. So on Twitter, you'll type hashtag TheEdCollabGathering space hashtag 1, because it's workshop number 1. At the top of every page, you'll see that listed. And on our YouTube channel, you'll also see them coming out as well. As long as you include the hashtag and the workshop number, then you'll be able to see who else is discussing that workshop along with you, and you'll also be able to interact with the presenters. So it's a way that we can stay connected. One special giveaway we're doing today. So our study series, it's 12 sessions every year. You can learn more about them through that session that I explained, or you'll see links to it as well. But every year we end our study series year with a session that we call Ending the Year with Joy. And so our last one is led by Janet Wong, who takes that title, Ending the Year with Joy, and she'll decide how she wants to share Ending the Year with Joy. It's fun. We always invite a poet or an author, an illustrator, or just some amazing creator to take that topic and help us think about that. So today we'll be giving away 10 seats to that study series. All you have to do is just use the hashtag throughout the day. We will randomly select some winners. If you'd like to see the rules and these prizes stated once again, if you go to the home page of our gathering site, just click on the main page, not the agenda, scroll to the bottom, you'll see it there. But basically, use the hashtag all day, and you might get to hang out with Janet Wong. Just to start our day together, I'd like us to think about this. Right now in the world, there's lots going on, as there has always been many things going on. But there's things that have risen to the top of our political landscape that feel large and sometimes scary. And we as educators are vacillating between being in an outside world that feels at times dangerous and worrisome and terrifying, and then coming into a classroom where we're trying to figure out, what do we do with all of it? Some of you feel kind of boxed in by what you feel like you're allowed to say or not to say. Others of you know you have a voice, but you're figuring out the best way to do it. And what I'd like to begin our day with is just thinking about this. The kids are leading us, whether it's the movement against gun violence like this, the March 14th walkout, or it's Black Lives Matter and other related movements like what has taken place in Sacramento and throughout the country, where youth are standing up against police violence in communities of color, or if it's the Dreamers, undocumented youth that literally by being arrested and by standing out publicly and raising their voices could be deported, could have their families torn apart, but they're standing up, facing the violence and fear that we all face, but doing it bravely and earnestly. And so I think for our day together, as we're about to kick off here, and for all the workshops that we have, it feels important to remember two truths. One is, every child in every classroom, regardless of their age, believes that they can change the world. Every kid everywhere believes that they can make their environment better and different, not just selfishly for themselves, but literally for everyone, which means that we as teachers often just have to step out of their way. Number two, it also means that adults in all of these children's lives have taught them on purpose or by accident that that is truth, have taught them on purpose or sometimes by accident that yes, they should have the gall to believe that they can change the world, because they really can. So everything we do through our literacy instruction, everything we do through the work with our students involves those two things: stepping out of the way as much as we can, but also standing with them, believing in them, and giving them the tools and sharing with them the ways that they can make tremendous change in the world. So that leads me to a quick introduction, and then passing over to our incredible opening keynote this morning. And then I hope you all have a terrific day today. So really, they need no introduction at all. It's kind of a silly thing that I'd have to, so I'll do this very quickly. So Ellin, Keene, and Dr. Nell are the co-editors of the Not This But That series, but have done a million other things. Their bio is extensive, and I don't have time for all of it, so you can go right onto our webpage and see it. But just a couple of highlights. You know Ellin Keene as the leader of the Denver-based Public Education and Business Coalition, the author of incredible books that have been foundational in the practice of literacy, including co-author of Mosaic of Thought. Her newest book that is, I think, a month away, and I don't know how you do these brilliant things, Ellin, constantly all the time, but her next book is on engagement and looking at the ways that we consider how do we engage students to make it not just this like fun thing we do on the side, but really meaningful, important, and deep, called Engaging Children, Igniting the Drive for Deeper Learning. That's coming out next month. Dr. Nell Duke is professor at the University of Michigan. She has been named by EdWeek one of the most influential scholars in the United States, of course. Ellin is a multi-award-winning scholar. She has been co-principal investigator on a number of projects funded by things like the Institute of Education Sciences and the National Science Foundation. She's the author, editor of a number of books. I also turn to her work all the time. They release these incredible, from the University of Michigan, policy briefs on teaching young children in literacy and education that are just jam-packed with everything you need to know to make your learning important and meaningful. So without further ado, I just want to thank you both for being here today. It's an incredible way to start the day, and looking forward to your keynote.
Thank you so much, Chris. What a great introduction, and what wonderful words, to sort of keep in our minds, about the generation of kids with whom we work, and how they are coming up in a very different way. And we are, we're thrilled. We're thrilled to watch that. We're thrilled to participate in the movements that are born there. And so thank you. We very much appreciate it, and we very much appreciate the way that everyone is donating to. It's for sure one of my pet causes, and that is because my nephew has run the No Child Hungry program for the First Lady of Virginia in the state of Virginia, and is now developing a No Child Hungry institute at the University of Virginia. So this is one that's very near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate anything that you all can can contribute. So we're going to just start out a little bit with and by telling you our story. Here we are. This was the very beginning. These were our Broadway years. These were the years when we really were very, very famous. And you can tell here that we have had a very tight collaboration over the last 15 to 20 years. We're arguing a little bit about that. I think it's close to 20. But it did start when I was sort of stalking Nell at conferences. And when she spoke from the point of view of a researcher, but it was so, so practical with respect to what I could do in my classroom, and subsequently as a professional developer working around the country and around the world. So Nell, you probably have a different version of that, because I was quaking in my boots to come up and ask you a question. I thought, oh, do I dare approach?
Yeah, and I was just stunned that the Ellin Keene was going to come up to me at conference and be interested in anything I had to say. So you can see how we have different versions of this story. But I do know that a thrilling moment for me was when I asked Ellin whether she would serve on an advisory board for a grant I had. The grant dealt with improving comprehension instruction. And in my mind, who better to turn to when thinking about improving comprehension instruction than Ellin Keene. So from my perspective, things worked out, was a little bit different, but I think it's mutual admiration.
No doubt. And so thus was born. Now, we want all of you around the world to say this out loud simultaneously, as we will. Thus was born, ready now? Nellin.
Nellin.
Nellin. And it has been just, for me, an extraordinary collaboration, and one that honestly I'm not sure I would have had as a classroom teacher, and then as a nonprofit director. I'm not sure that I would have had the kind of close collaboration with someone who's doing very, very important research in the country had we not had that initial meeting, and found that I had actually something to say to Nell, and she certainly had something to say to me. So we've concluded over these, many years, since the Mesozoic era, I think, that kind of collaboration is rich and productive and fun, and that we wish, that all of you could have the opportunity to, whether you're a practitioner or a researcher, to be in close collaboration with someone who plays a different role. We feel, very, very strongly that practitioners can grow richly and deeply from reading research and research reviews. And for me, the part that's been fun, and I was lucky here because I had a professor both as an undergraduate and a graduate student who taught me very early in my career how to read research. And it was great fun to read. Well, I won't say great fun. It was interesting. It was interesting to read when I could imagine how it applied in my own classroom. And that was really what I enjoyed the most, to just say to myself as I'm reading, I understand that, the research, but I want to place it in my imagination, in my classroom and in the classrooms of teachers with whom I've worked. And so I think, but there's a reverse too, for sure. And that is that we need researchers to understand the problems of practice that we face. We need, research researchers to conduct research that actually addresses our problems, the kinds of things that we see every day in the classroom. We need to, at some level, have the foundation of that research to go confidently into teaching in the ways that we may hunch are correct, but we really want to make sure that we've got that background. In order to do that, as practitioners, we've got to communicate so that researchers really have access to our thinking and the problems of practice we face. So Nell is going to spend just a little bit of time talking about what researchers have to say to practitioners, and then I'll do the reverse.
Sounds good, Ellin, and you can press stop sharing. Yep, there, great. There we go. Hi, everybody. Nell Duke, University of Michigan. I'm really thrilled to have an opportunity to talk to such a wonderful audience this morning. And so I am going to talk indeed about what researchers could have to say or to share with practitioners. I say that recognizing that these are fuzzy categories, and we'll actually talk about that toward the end of the presentation. So what do researchers have to say about to practitioners? Just first of all, to back up for a minute about what research even is. So in my definition, and a pretty widely shared definition, research is the systematic collection and analysis of data in answer to a specific question. So that's a very important understanding. When we design research, we design it so that multiple answers can be obtained. In other words, if we've designed the study so that you can only possibly come to one conclusion from it, that would actually be not research, or at least not very good research. And in research, we have lots of very specific traditions that we use in our data collection and analysis. For example, we have randomized controlled trials, and that's a very specific approach to research. We have case studies, and again, there are very specific norms and expectations related to case studies and so on. Generally, we say that research should be subjected to peer review. And that is where other scientists will look at the research and see whether it met appropriate standards of rigor and whether the claims are appropriate to the data that was collected and analyzed. And I should also say that, boring though it is, research, as many of you know from the medical field or from environmental science and so on, it works through a slow accumulation of knowledge. So research, generally, we don't want to draw really big conclusions based on one study. We sort of slowly build our knowledge base over time. I do want to talk a little bit about what research is not, because I think there's a lot of confusion about this. Just because something is written in a book or in an article doesn't actually make it research. It doesn't even mean it's research informed. So there are a lot of professional books out there. Well, people will say so-and-so's research, but it's not research. It's a book. It's their opinion. It could be a very well-founded opinion, but it's their opinion about teaching. And that includes my own professional books as well. I try to make them research informed, but they're not a report of research. A report of research would have a methods section. It would talk about how the data were collected, how the data were analyzed, what methodology was being used, and so on. And similarly, just because somebody's citing research doesn't mean it's research. It could be a research review. It could be a research informed. But it doesn't mean just because you're reading a professional book with a research reference section doesn't mean that professional book is necessarily research, right? And finally, just because somebody's at a university doesn't mean that what they're writing is necessarily research or even research informed. So just keeping in mind, there are people who do research who are outside the university, and there are people inside the university who aren't necessarily doing research. So we really want to go back to that fundamental definition that I talked about of the systematic analysis and collection of data in answer to a question. So what I want to do now is just say a little bit about where we can find research, actual research studies. A great resource for us is Google Scholar. And part of why Google Scholar is so nice is because they do indicate for you when it's a piece of research that you could get for free, even if you don't have an affiliation with a particular database that includes research articles. ResearchGate is also a place that people are going to increasingly to find research articles. The National Institutes of Health has something called PubMed that does publish a lot of research relevant to children, and that's all free to access. You can also get reviews of research in any of those same places using the search term review or the search term meta-analysis if you're looking for a quantitative review of research. The National Academies do wonderful reviews of research that are available free, including a fantastic one last year on English learners. And then there are various derivatives of research, such as the What Works Clearinghouse in the United States. If you just Google What Works Clearinghouse, you can see what they have to offer. Their practice guides are particularly useful. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about a couple of reasons why research is valuable. We're trying to make a case for research for practice. So first, I want to talk with you a little bit about the notion that although our personal experiences are very valuable and the foundation of our teaching, sometimes it's the case that they can mislead us. And a classic example in the world outside of education is the shape of the earth, right? For such a long time, humans thought the earth was flat. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that you would think the earth is flat, right? I mean, your personal experiences every day would give you a lot of ideas that it would be flat. But over time, research helped us to understand that that really couldn't be the case. Another example, dyslexia. So lots of people think that dyslexia is caused by a visual problem. And you'll see this in, when sitcoms take on dyslexia or cartoons, or when you just talk to the general public, they'll think that, the letters are all mixed around and the letters look like popcorn on the page. And from your own personal experience, that could make a lot of sense. You'll see kids with dyslexia who will do things that look like that's the problem. But in fact, what we know from research now is that for the vast majority of students with severe word reading difficulties, the problem isn't visual, it's auditory. It's actually a core phonological processing deficit. So it's just another example for us of the fact that sometimes, our personal experiences, what we can just individually view, don't necessarily tell us what is actually true. Turning to another rationale for research, sometimes research is just pointing out things that we didn't realize or we didn't know what we didn't know. And some of my early work on informational text and how little informational text is available or used to be available in primary grade classrooms. In my study in the United States, first graders were getting only 3.6 minutes a day of experience with informational text. Well, research just sometimes points to something that, maybe we hadn't otherwise thought of. It reveals some new ideas. Another valuable role from research is that it can allow us into places and situations that we might not be able to get into otherwise. So, for example, there is great research now using eye tracking, where, for example, researchers put eye tracking devices, believe it or not, on 4-year-olds while they're listening to read aloud. And we got lots of valuable information about where little 4-year-olds' eyes are when they're being read to. And for example, one thing we learned is that they may be on the pictures, they may be on the teacher's face, they may be out the window, but they're very rarely on the print. And as a result of learning that, we've got some new interventions in which teachers do certain moves when reading to preschoolers that actually help develop their ability to attend to the print. And I'm thinking particularly of Professor Laura Justice's work there. There are also lots of ethnographies that have gotten us into places and situations we might not be able to observe otherwise. So, for example, Kristen Perry's research looking at immigrants from Sudan and looking at those children's experiences, not just in school, but what's happening outside of school, in their community, in their religious institutions, at home, and so forth. And that information has been very valuable to teachers who work with these students. Research is also valuable because it helps us pool data, right? So as an individual teacher, maybe we have just a few children with disorders on the autism spectrum. But if we look across many, many classrooms, we can begin to draw some conclusions about effective educational practices for children with ASD. Or by pooling lots of data, we've come to some insights in recent years about how important world knowledge is to achievement. So those are really important areas to think about as well. I just want to close with a few, this portion of our presentation, with a few risks that we run into in terms of what researchers have to say about practitioners. One is that it's very important that researchers and practitioners alike don't just attend to the research that supports what they already believe. So this is a real concern where I'll notice that people are really enthusiastic about a study that matches what they think, but really disregard a study that doesn't match what they think. So similarly, just if a research study finds something, or a set of studies finds something that you wish that it hadn't found, try hard not to disregard it. Try not to have that confirmation bias, right? Try to recognize that sometimes we're just wrong, or our thinking is mistaken. So instead of attacking the study, which is what people usually do when the study doesn't agree with what they thought, really try to embrace the ideas. And finally, we have to watch misinterpretation of studies, both individually and in terms of other people's misinterpretation as well. And so I'm going to stop sharing at this point and turn it back over to Ellin.
Okay, so let's spend just a few minutes talking about what I think we practitioners have to say to researchers, and how really important it is to develop these relationships. I mean, Nell and I have had every range of conversation about research and practice. Some that were somewhat tense, some that were absolutely illuminating, really, for both of us. And I think this really begins with relationship, as do most other things in the world. That when we as practitioners actively seek, and I believe that researchers should do this as well, actively seek a relationship with someone who is willing to listen to the problems of practice that we encounter in everyday work with children, and is willing to share research-based or research answers to problems of practice that we're struggling with. That's rare indeed. I think we have very, very little, sadly, too little interaction with the research community. And as Nell mentioned, a minute ago, the problem of misinterpretation can really be a problem. So our collaboration really did start with this relationship. It's true that we did not star in Frozen on Broadway, and I have to admit that. I'm brokenhearted to admit that, but there it is. And so what it really did start with was a series of research symposia that was hosted by the Public Education and Business Coalition in Denver, where lots of us have been working on certainly on reading research and on working with teachers side by side in their classrooms. And the Public Education and Business Coalition was kind enough to sponsor a series, and that went on for 3 or 4 years, I think, where we, brought people, researchers and practitioners into the same room, which was
Ellin,
a really unusual thing. Go ahead now.
Ellin, can I just interject? Could you go to presenter
Sure.
mode, please?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to switch back. Did that do it, Carolyn?
No, we're still seeing the slide sorter, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just share a couple more things and switch over, and maybe you can chat with me and tell me how to get back to presentation mode.
No problem.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. So let's talk a little bit about about some of the questions that I've been considering throughout our collaboration. We did these things intentionally. We wrote or co-edited the series of Not This But That books because there were so many practices that were just ubiquitous in schools that we saw every week and were very, very frustrating. I think, for example, of teaching in kindergarten, teaching a letter a week. Well, we've known for years that does not that's not the best way to approach letter knowledge with kindergartners, and yet it was in many ways a fixture. It was institutionalized in some way. And so the Not This But That books are intended to dislodge some of those myths, some of the practices that have become institutionalized and that have absolutely no research to support them. So that, those are sort of the two ways that we've been working on it. But this, Nell mentioned this a moment ago, and I was going to back this up. Beware the echo chamber. I mean, as Nell and I have been in collaboration and conversation now for a number of years, I have to ask myself these questions. And I think practitioners do. With whom do I converse about my practice, most frequently? And I have to say that I certainly am likely to spend time with others who believe as I believe. I think that's really true. But I've come to realize that I'd like to be provoked. I think that some of my best work in terms of thinking and writing has come when I've been jarred out of my comfort zone with respect to what I've always known, and really challenged to rethink my practice, based on evidence. And it is uncomfortable sometimes, and it is, as Nell said, it's not always what we want to hear, but it is it's provocative, and it is helpful to find new ways to think about what we've done for years. I also really have to think about how I listen. How can I really engage with those who have done work with which I may disagree? So we all have beliefs. We all have foundational beliefs that drive our practice, and we need to. I think in my for me, it has worked really well to be able to open up and really listen, to attend sessions at conferences that may not be the people that I would typically go and see. And you know what? It's learning happens. I think Piaget had this right, when we have some cognitive dissonance. And there are times when, as a practitioner, researchers provide cognitive dissonance. And that, to me, is a healthy thing. So I'll turn it back to Nell to talk about some of the challenges here. But I'll just say, beware the echo chamber. Nell?
Yeah, thank you, Ellin. I'm going to now talk about the challenge of, taking on beloved practices. So, both Ellin and I have had the experience in which we know a practice is not supported by research, really not effective. And yet sometimes we can take heat for that. So on your slide, you're going to see a post I did for Edutopia, What Doesn't Work, Literacy Practices We Should Abandon. And in the introduction to the piece, a particular practice I took on just as an example of something that's probably not worth the time we're spending on it is the dressing of the weather bear. And for those of you in parts of the world where you're not familiar with this, how this works is that the classroom has a teddy bear, and the classroom has different sorts of clothes for the teddy bear, like something you would wear when it's raining, and something you would wear when it's snowy, and something you would wear when it's warm. And each morning, the class will dress the teddy bear appropriately for the weather. My argument was that's probably not a great use of class time. First of all, the kids all got to school, so presumably they're already well acquainted with the weather. Second of all, the bear actually doesn't ever go outside, so I'm not sure why the bear needs to be dressed for the weather in the first place, and so on. And so what I did in the blog post is, I took this on as an example of probably a fairly poor use of time. And the heat that I took, the comments on and offline, the responses to the blog post of, I'm this hated person who wants to take all the fun out of school by taking on the weather bear. It just goes to show you that sometimes it can be a little challenging for us to actually take on some of these beloved practices. So I'm going to move on and just show you another example of that. So you'll see on your screen here a duck. You might wonder why. So there's a section in our book in the Not This But That series, No More Reading for Junk, which was written by Barb Marinac and Linda Gambrell. And in that book, Barb Marinac talks about how one year their theme for March's reading month or for their reading work, and oh good, Ellen's holding up the book so you can see it. Their theme there was actually, and I'll show it on the screen as well, their theme was duck away with a book. And so she, wanting to motivate kids to read, actually dressed as a duck and walked around the school acting like a duck. She reflects in the book that, now she certainly understands that there are other and different ways of motivating children to read. But when we take on March's Reading Month, we get a lot of heat for it. So what you'll learn in the book is about a study, or what you would learn about the study here on your screen, or I'll just briefly tell you about it, is basically that when the reward for something is closer to the desired behavior, it generally works better. And so the question they pursued in the study was, what would happen with third graders if we either gave them a book as a reward for reading, or we gave them something that was not reading related, not literacy related, like a Nerf ball or a bracelet or a keychain or a sticker. And you all know that it's very common, right, that we give kids non-reading related prizes for reading. So the researchers looked at this with third graders, and they had a very clever design in which what they did is they observed the students after the situation in which they had received either a book or nothing or one of these little prizes unrelated to reading, to see what they chose to do in their time. And what they found was that kids who had been rewarded with a book or with nothing at all were much more likely to choose to read later. The kids who had been rewarded with a, Nerf ball or a Pez dispenser or the like were less likely to choose to read later. They also tended to spend, if they had been rewarded with a book or with nothing at all, more time reading, and they tended to read more words. So this study is important because it helps us see that we really have to let go of this beloved, it seems, practice of rewarding kids for reading, especially in March, with all sorts of prizes that are not actually related to reading. And there are lots of other strategies you can use. Obviously, we don't have time to get into all of them, but providing choice in what kids read, opportunities for collaboration, providing high interest books for students, using interest inventories and interviews and observation to know what kids are going to be interested in reading. what Marinak and Gambrell call book blessings, when the teacher really talks up a book and kind of advertises that book to students. That seems to make a difference. Book clubs and other social opportunities around reading. Looking for opportunities to connect books to sort of a teachable moment in the classroom. Like, if a child comes in one day with a broken arm, there are going to be more kids interested in reading about bones and broken arms and nutrition related to bones and broken arms. So kind of taking advantage of those opportunities. And finally, project-based learning is, I think, an important strategy to consider when generating reading excitement. So teaching a letter a week, as was already mentioned, is another example of a practice that people love. It's so hard to get people to stop this practice, and yet it really is inconsistent with what we know from research and professional expertise and wisdom about the best way to teach the alphabet. And what I'm going to ask you to do here is kind of maybe consider inserting one of your beloved practices. So is there anything you're doing that you just love doing it and you really believe in it, but is it possible that research and the larger professional wisdom would say we have to let go of that practice? And now I'm going to turn it back over to Ellin, who will take on another challenge that we've faced in our work connecting research and practice.
Thanks, Nell. Get it shared here. Okay, so I just thought, it's early on a Saturday morning. It might be a lovely time. Well, it's early where I am. I don't know where it is, what time it is where you are, but it's very, very early on a Saturday morning where I am. And I've been, pounding my coffee here. So I thought I'd do a little read aloud for you. Here's the citation for the study. It's called, the studies from the Reading Research Quarterly, it's called Examining the Acquisition of Vocabulary Knowledge Depth Among Preschool Students. So I'd like for you all to listen carefully. There will be a quiz at the end of this. So, all right, here we go. The conceptual continuum theory posits that the perceptual accessibility is the primary determinant of ease of learning. Our examination of the kinds of information that we could naturally supply about different words made evident that the types of information that can be provided about word meanings may be a second factor that affects word learning and may help explain differences differential learning of varying types of words. These results demonstrate that not only were the concrete nouns better learned because of perceptual accessibility, but they were also naturally lent themselves to fuller, more varied kinds of instructional information. Is anyone in the 40 countries with whom I'm currently speaking awake? Is anyone still there? Knock on the chat room to let us know if you're still alive. One of the problems we have, and I'm poking fun, and I think I'm sorry, but I might not be really sorry. That is that researchers and practitioners don't necessarily write for each other. So this study actually turns out to be an incredibly valuable, interesting study about young children's word learning, vocabulary learning, and really suggests some amazing different kinds of ways that we can present abstract vocabulary to very young children. But the way that it's written, I worry that a lot of practitioners are not going to dig into something like that and really know what it means. It's just, we have priorities other than spending a whole bunch of time reading. And the truth is that there's so much out there, it becomes very, very overwhelming. So I just put together a couple of ideas that have been successful for me and in groups with whom I've been involved over the years, and just as a throwing out some ideas that you might want to try. When you get together with a PLC or a study group in your school, and if you don't have one, I think we should get one, because that's where the most important work happens, is in collaborative thinking. think together about the problems of practice that you guys are experiencing. Just focus on one area and sort of keep it focused, keep it fairly, fairly narrow, and then try together to examine that problem both by study in your classrooms, by really action research in your own classrooms, by getting into each other's classrooms and observing and feeding back to each other about what's going on. I mean, classroom observation is incredibly powerful, especially powerful when you ask colleagues to join you and gather data about your students when it's pretty hard to do that when you're in the middle of facilitating their learning. But also go into the resources that Nell mentioned earlier and find the sources. Find something that addresses your problem of practice. And if there are 6 or 7 studies and it begins to feel overwhelming, pick one and have your colleague pick another and another, so that you can then read 1 instead of 6 and jigsaw the information. From the study I read, it suggested this about the particular problem of practice we're experiencing. Well, I had information from this study or this meta-analysis or this synthesis of the research that said this. It's very overwhelming if you're thinking about taking it on individually, but not at all if you're thinking about taking it on as a group. In the early days of the Public Education and Business Coalition, our work, and this involved people that Stephanie Harvey, Ann Goodvis, Debbie Miller, Chris Tavani, people that we turn to, I think, for really thoughtful understanding of our field and have tried lots of different kinds of practices. Our work was really about dividing up and reading different journals, reading different books that were theoretical but not necessarily research, and kind of putting it all together to say, what do we take from this? How do we implement in our classroom? So, we're working with colleagues who are sort of weighed down, I think, sometimes with ineffective practices, and that can be really frustrating. But I really feel and have been so gratified by the times that I've chosen, hopefully with a group, to dive in and share what we discover and to make it manageable. We don't, as practitioners, particularly people who are serving kids in the classroom every day, we don't have time to dig into all of it, but we do have time to use books like the Not This But That series, where you do get a good overview of the research and you get tremendously helpful, practical, research-based ideas to try in the classroom. So it is about making abstract theory concrete. There are certainly other challenges, Nell.
Great, thanks, Ellin. So I'm going to turn it to a third challenge that we'll discuss today. And that's really the challenge of there being so much research, thousands and thousands of studies that are published every day, and the challenges that poses for us. So I just want to give as an example a couple of studies that have come out just so far in 2018 in journals related to economics that I think are really important for education. And the first of these studies really deals with this issue of specialization, or some people call it departmentalization or platooning, where different teachers in the elementary school will teach different subjects. And this study examined whether that's helpful to children's achievement. And the answer in this study was no, it actually had a negative effect, a small negative effect, 0.11 standard deviations of achievement in reading and math, to have departmentalization or specialization like that. A second study had to do with essentially what we often call looping, but when a teacher has kids more than 1 year in a row. And that study found that that tends to benefit children, particularly children from minority backgrounds. And actually that it particularly seems to be helpful when it's a less effective teacher, which I know seems counterintuitive, but maybe that less effective teacher is really supported by already knowing those kids, right? So here are two really important studies. How are we going to get the information from those studies out into the broader world? Well, one thought I had was we have a book in progress. I'm very excited to say for the series, and I won't announce the authors yet. But that book that's coming out hopefully in the future will be called "No More Teaching Without Positive Relationships." And I thought, okay, that's a really good connection to make with those studies, right? Because those studies at their heart have to do with relationships with students and how our different ways of organizing the day affect them. Another example is there's this fantastic body of work, long body of work on highly effective teachers of literacy. So studies in which you compare teachers who are really successful with their students to teachers who are kind of mediocre with their students or average with their students. And there's a ton of that literature. It doesn't really particularly fit, not this, but that type of model, but it's important work. And I'm just scrolling through on the screen here so you can see all these characteristics of exemplary teachers that have been identified across a number of these studies. And again, if you want to learn more, you would just Google learning from exemplary teachers of literacy. But the point is, there's so much research. So one of the real challenges in connecting research and practice is really finding a way to deal with, the volume of work that there is. So I'm going to stop sharing and just turn it over to Ellin for some final words. Ellin, you're muted.
Oh, that's so appropriate. So many people want to mute me so much of the time. So that was really very appropriate that I was muted. It's as it should be, I think. So sorry, let me go back to sharing the slides. Okay. So we want to leave you all today with something that we hope will be very, very relevant and important and doable as soon as tomorrow. I think we've emphasized developing relationships with researchers developing relationships with practitioners. But I also want to really underscore some work that we have done through the Heinemann Fellows Program. Heinemann is a publisher of professional books for teachers. And we've actually just moving into our third two-year cohort with practitioners from all over the country in the U.S. who have ideas about action research they'd like to take on in their classroom. And though it's not simple, the process really comes from sitting down and thinking, wow, what is a problem of practice that I encounter, and can I generate a question that is studyable from that question? Can I generate it in some sort of intervention, and then can I really have the discipline to take particular kinds of data and then to analyze it. So it is, it's a little more than standing back to observe your kids at work every day, but it's a little less involved than the study from which I just did the read aloud, and yet it's a deeply satisfying and incredibly informative for the field, and we've found it very intellectually stimulating process, and there's literally no reason why all of you couldn't do that. It just means that you need to have a problem in your practice, and I think raise your hand if you don't. So just by way of closing, I think Nell and I would like to say that it is that these relationships are key. We need to get to know each other, researchers and practitioners. We need to make sure that we're really interested, that genuinely open and really interested in what the other is doing. Researchers need to be responsive to practitioners' needs and listen to what really is important that we're trying to say, and we need to be responsive and interested in taking on the reading of some research that's out there, because it can be extraordinarily helpful, and in the end take on an action research project. We would love to see that happen. So Chris, I'll hand it back to you. We've gone a bit over, and I'm sorry, but we've enjoyed so much being here with all of you today, and being a part of this extraordinary collaboration among teachers from all over the world, educators from all over the world. I feel very, very honored to have been part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Sorry to cut you off there. No, thank you, Ellin. Thank you, Nell. So Twitter comments, everyone's minds are buzzing. It's such an important. What I love about both of your work always, and the work that you publish and the work that you write, and when you speak, is that you number one know that as teachers we're intellectuals, that we are here thinking deeply about our practice. We're concerned about it. We want to make the best choices that we can. And I just want to thank you, both of you, and just share my love of your work with you, that you just really respect all of us in that way, that you treat us as intellectual equals. And I appreciate that and hear that message loud and clear in your work. And there's just so much for us to chew on from this. So thank you. Thank you to both of you for joining us. Thank you to all of you who are joining from all spots all over the world. All day long, you can use the hashtag TheEdCollabGathering as a way to communicate and share. For our upcoming sessions, during each session this morning, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sessions, and then our closing will be this afternoon. If you go to our website, thegathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, where many of you are, you can choose what session you'd like to watch. One thing that's especially wonderful about the Ed Collab is this is one of the few times that you can actually have a magic duplicating device about yourself. When you go to a conference and there's like 15 things happening at the same time and you want to go to all of them, here you can kind of do that because all of these sessions are recorded and are back right up on the page right where they were. So if you want to go back and listen again to Nell and Ellin, you certainly can do that, or to check out some of their research citations, but you can do the same for all upcoming sessions. So coming up right at 11 Eastern, so in just a little over 10 minutes, we have Carla and Luce, who are doing a session on culturally and linguistically sustaining book clubs for the upper grades and middle school classroom, which is a great follow-up from the session we were just in, because they both are university educator researchers that do an intensive research around multilingual students, but they also are practitioners too. So it's a perfect blend. Look how we did that. Then workshop number 2 is Kristen Zemke and Kirk Zemke. That's Kristen's brother, doing a session on cognitive wellness in the middle school and secondary classroom. Kirk specializes in psychology and kinesiology, and together they will be helping you think about research and ideas around cognitive wellness and ways that you can implement that in your classroom. And then workshop number 3 is with Julia Reynolds and Taya Cotter, who are both instructional leaders that will be sharing ideas and work around, especially for administrators and other team leaders, literacy leadership, the why, what, and how for grades K through 12. So we hope that you'll enjoy those upcoming sessions and the rest across the day. Final reminder, today is totally free, no registration. By the way, we also really love, and I'm loving so far, all the photos you're posting on Twitter of like sitting with your coffee. So if you're in a group or anyone else, please share some photos with us. But because you're here for free, in fact, someone said they were ironing while they were listening to the first session. Can you consider what would you probably have paid for that cup of coffee in the morning, or for lunch with some friends halfway through the day, or even for registration, or even if you're feeling really generous for travel to a conference like this? What would you pay? And what we ask you to do is to pay that joy forward. Our adopted charity for today is No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength. You can find more information and the direct link to go directly to their website and share your donation right on our page. It's up in the top left corner. You'll find it there. Or share to any charity or any way of giving today's joy forward. So thank you all very much for all that you do. I hope you have an exciting day, and please join us at the end of the day. Oh, just before we go, very last session, just before the final keynote, it's really important to show up on time because we'll be making a number of announcements, including, that's the time we always announce our next date and our keynote speaker, which you won't want to miss that. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll stay connected on Twitter throughout the day. Take care.